You're listening to MJCF Presents Abolish, a conversational series uncovering truths from the family regulation system, aka Child Protective Services. My name is MJ. Let's jump right in. Welcome, Ms. Brittany DeBarris. I wanted to bring you in because you play such a huge part in Nate's life. Brittany, thank you so much and welcome. You are also a parent advocate with ORPC. And what's unique about this, you've been a parent advocate, is you are Nate's partner. So you guys are both parent advocates and you're married. So I'm excited to see what that looks like for you. But before we get there, Nate, I wanted to just get a little bit of background. How did you and Brittany cross paths?
Well, we all know that foster care is a prerequisite for prison. And when I was really young, I was 18, I went to federal prison. And when I got out, I was in a halfway house and I didn't have no supports. And I was trying to figure out a different way to do things. And every person that I knew was in no way at that point a positive influence to me. And one day I went to go talk to somebody and she was in the hotel room. And I don't forget walking outside, my mom actually gave me a ride. Mm-hmm. And I looked at my mom, I was like, hey, do you see that girl in there sitting on the laptop? And I was like, yeah, I don't know how that's going to happen. I may not ever see her again. And we have a mutual friend that she was taking care of at the time. And as I was coming over frequently and talking to our mutual friend, at some point she was like, nobody comes and sees you at the halfway house? And I was like, no. I was like, nobody even I can't get a cigarette. Like, I'm down bad. And she's like, I'll come and see you at the halfway house. And I kind of laughed. I was like, oh, you can't be like a criminal. You can't. And she's like, no, I don't even have any traffic tickets. And I was like, I'll get you the paperwork. Oh. I got her the paperwork. And every single day from the moment she turned that paperwork in, she came to that halfway house for at least that 1 hour or until she got kicked out. Wow. And she came, gave me food against my will, got me a phone, got me cigarettes, bought the whole halfway house food, and just was like super holding me down and being there for a time when I had no other person like that. And I was actually contemplating running from the halfway house at one point because I couldn't get a job and I just didn't know how I was going to do it. Yeah. And all my PO wanted was an address, and I couldn't give them an address because every single address that I knew was not a place that I could be at. Yeah. And in that process, one day she was just like, well, I had a conversation with my mom, and we were really, really good friends. We didn't we weren't in a relationship. We didn't kiss or anything even at this point. When she came to me and said, you can move into my mom said, you can move into her house. And I remember thinking, I didn't believe it because I had met her mom like one time, and I was like, there's no way she's going to let some random 19-year-old felon just move into their house. And she did. So that's how we met.
Wow. And as we all know, to be a parent advocate, you had to have had a case with the Department of Human Services, CPS, Child Protective Services, in close, which means that you guys went through that journey together. Mm-hmm. How did it start?
When I first got out of prison, I didn't use drugs. I was clean and I was sober. And at the time, she was using drugs. And when I got out of the halfway house, I fell back right into doing what I did before I went. And I was selling drugs, and that eventually started me using drugs again. And I was 19, 20 years old. And we were just living in hotels. We really moved around a lot. We were with her mom first. And after we're at her mom's house, we were in a hotel, probably the same hotel. We were up there for a couple months on Sheridan.
La Quinta?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we were there for a while. And sometime after that, we moved into a house. And we were in that house for a long time. And in that time is when both of our drug habits got really, really bad. And it wasn't until we moved out of that house and we moved back in with her mom, a big piece of what changed our relationship was my mom having another child. And so when I was, 21? Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was 21 is when my mom got pregnant. And when my mom got pregnant, at the time she still wasn't clean. And she had medical complications that when she went into labor, and it caused her to have like what's it called?
A C-section.
An emergency C-section. And she was at one hospital, and my little sister got flighted for life to Children's Hospital. And because she had the C-section, she was in recovery. She couldn't leave. But also, she had told me that at that point is when she had told me there might be problems because she wasn't going to test clean.
Yeah.
And so me and her, we stopped everything we were doing literally and our whole world just stopped, and we just went to Children's Hospital and spent the next 30, 45 days or however long she was there. And in that time that we were there, we had several conversations. I've always wanted kids, and the answer was always a hard no. From the time we met up until the time my little sister was born. And something about her watching me be with my little sister when my little sister was born changed her mind. And so when we left the hospital, my little sister also went into the foster care system right then. And my mom was part of the Jefferson County Fit Court program. And she did complete that and successfully got her back.
In Fit Court specializes, it's a special court for people that have drug addiction. So you come to court a lot more often. It's more supportive. They have a lot of versions of Fit Courts around the nation that are proven to have more success rates than if it was just a regular DNN case.
So during that time, we were solely focused on just supporting my mom. Like we really, that was really our goal, was just to help my mom get my little sister back. And right before that, we had just moved into this really nice condo loft, and we were by ourselves. And it was like a couple weeks after that, finally, when my little sister got discharged, and that the day she was discharged was the day that my mom found out she wasn't coming home. And so it was like a long time. Like she kind of had the idea, we all thought, but when that finally happened, they came and we all lived together, and we all just supported each other at that time, and we were all clean, and we went with her to her court hearings and supported her through that. But during that whole time period is also when we decided we wanted to try to have a kid.
Wow.
And I can remember the day that she told me, because I didn't believe it. I really didn't believe it. She's like, no, she's like, I'll do it. And she's like, we'll stop the birth control. And I didn't believe her. All the way up until the moment that we were in the doctor's office and it was happening, I didn't believe her. But
wow,
I had my IUD, so
sure.
Yeah, so like, and I remember when she first told me that she was, I told my mom, I was like, something's gonna come up. We're gonna sleep in that day or something, and I just doubted it. And so once it happened, my mom had a private OBGYN that accepted Medicaid, and so we already had discussed with him like when we were going to try, what the dates, and they knew we already had a relationship. We were already in the process of like wanting to have a kid. And before we had the positive pregnancy test results, I had told her I wanted twins. Like that's what I really, really wanted. And we had 2 names picked out, and she had the positive pregnancy test, and we set up an appointment to go in for our first ultrasound at 14 weeks. And we conceived conjoined twins that didn't make it past 9.5 weeks. And that was a pretty hard time for both of us and in our relationship. And luckily I was still seeing an individual therapist at that time, and it was for me. But when she knew about what was happening, she allowed Brittany to come in and really helped us work through that whole process. And so after that, and after the whole healing process happened, like physical healing process, we got back with the doctor and we tried again, and we succeeded, and we had our first son. And when she got pregnant with our first son, we moved out of the city. That's when we moved up to the mountains, and we just kind of disappeared from everywhere. And I got my first job. I never had a job up until that point.
Wow.
And then he was born. And that's also when we got married, was in that time period when we lived up in the mountains. And after he was born, we were staying on our own for quite some. When we moved back down, is when we moved to the Crosslands.
We stayed with my mom for a little bit, and then we moved into the Crosslands.
Yeah, when we were at the Crosslands, she also worked at this hotel, and we lived there. And a lot of people that worked at the hotel at the time didn't like her because she was like new, but she was calling a lot of shots and making a lot of changes. And one time we got into an argument, and she was crying, and she went back down to the office. And a coworker who didn't like me and already didn't like her called the police on me. The police showed up. I'm like literally wrestling around with my son on the floor laughing. And because they show up on a domestic violence, somebody has to go to jail. And so I get arrested for a domestic violence. That night I get arrested. I bond out literally that immediately. I come right back out. And at the time, there was when like pretrial services was starting, which is like a pre-conviction before the conviction, where you're required to do certain elements as requirements for you to have access to getting a bond. And I did that for a couple months, and then I just like forgot. It was also that when that incident happened, when the police came and arrested me, it was like 29 days before I flawlessly completed my federal supervised release.
I see.
So a part of the reason why I just was like trying to like avoid it is because like I was so afraid that it was going to affect something on with my federal parole and or supervised release. And so I didn't do anything about it, and we went on about our lives, and we eventually moved to my mom's house, and we were staying with my mom, and we were actually staying outside. We stayed inside, but at night we went out and slept in the car because it wasn't that big of a house, and there was a lot of people who lived there, and it was like my mom's in-laws and all of her and her husband's kids. So we stayed out in the car at night, and one night somebody had to have called because they came specifically looking for me. I had the warrant for that FTA from never going back. It was like over a year later, Kason was like, our oldest son was like a year old.
Wow.
And when they came to arrest me on the FTA is when they found drugs in the car, found drugs in the home, and found drugs on her. And so she was arrested. And when she was arrested, now I'm arrested. They left our one son with my mom for one night because it was at my mom's house. And then the next day, as soon as the computers were up and running and somebody typed her name into a computer, they immediately came and took him.
Because she had a current open case at the time?
No,
or was
her case was terminated.
Just because of her background?
Just because her rights were lost with me and my youngest brother.
Oh, wow.
Her case was already successfully closed.
And she still had custody of her daughter, the youngest
closed,
child. Yeah,
closed. That case was entirely closed.
It had just closed.
But it did have just closed prior to that. But still, it was closed. But I mean, she had a long history with the Department of Human Services.
That's such a huge issue. I don't really want to get off on a tangent, but there's so many barriers because we know people in poverty and people of color are captured into the system. And then once you're in the system, then you have that record. And then you can no longer change and be better and then be a grandparent essentially to her grandson. And she has
she was always a
so I just feel some type of way about that.
And she had already proven herself
that she's safe and that she can do
it.
As recently as just a couple of months prior. So that's actually should work more in her benefit.
Actually, you're right.
And it worked against her.
And
I feel some type of way about that.
That was something I kind of just like took on the chin. That was something I felt like was so hard for me to fight that.
Yeah, and it is.
It is.
But that's the reason why we need to abolish the system because
for things like that.
For your mom to have custody of her children at that time, there are so many kids that have to stay in foster care because the biological family have cases from years prior. And you were a bad person or you had a drug addiction back then, so you've obviously never changed, even though you've been through this entire system.
Absolutely.
So yeah, but my apologies, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I agree with you 100%. So they removed him. You got out first, right?
Yeah, I got a PR bond.
So she got a day later, she got a PR bond. It is noteworthy that from the day she bonded out to the time she first saw Kason was like over 30 days. And our 1-year-old who's literally never left our presence, never been outside of either mom or dad's presence.
They put a protection order on me from my child from day one.
Yeah.
So I didn't see him. He was taken September 16th, and I did not see him till October 30th.
Oh my jeez.
Yeah. So when I was originally arrested for that DV back at the hotel, literally those first couple court hearings I did go to, the judge amended the protection order. Said I can live in the place where she works.
Sure.
We were like literally the judge looked at us and was like, if you see each other and you're one to fight, just turn around and walk the other way.
Yeah.
And so it was like pretty open ended like that.
Absolutely.
But when you get arrested on a warrant like that, all of the original things go back into full effect.
Yes.
So there was immediately the protective order, no contact with her or the kids, or with our kid at the time. So when I get out, literally, I got out fairly shortly too, right afterwards. It was like 5 days because I got bonded out when we got a hold of the bondsman. And so at that point, we were inside my mom's house, and I literally went up and looked in there. I said, I need to go find a job right now, and we need to go find somewhere to live, like ASAP. So we literally went, I said, I'm going to go drive around the neighborhood. I want to find a house. We got a couple numbers out of the neighborhood, went to the nearest little shopping strip mall, which is right next to the neighborhood, went in and put an application, and I had a job the next day.
Wow.
And already a lead on the house. That house ended up working out for us. We had a real big 5-bedroom house. Like within the first 15, 30 days,
Wow.
we had the 5-bedroom house. I had 2 full-time jobs. I was working 80 hours a week. I had our 3 random UAs plus our 2 or 3 visits a week and no vehicle. But we were doing it. But we were actively doing it.
And I was also pregnant with Kyler.
And that's
the
when,
middle child.
yes.
At the time.
And so
And working at the hotel in Golden.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
And so we were both, and we're doing it all on the bus, but we were doing it. We made it into that house. My criminal protective order gets amended, so I'm allowed to be in the home. Everything's all fixed. And social services tells me this whole time, well, as soon as your thing gets fixed, you can move back in the home. And I was like, okay. So as soon as it got fixed, we were like, are we ready? Can I move back in the home now? And they're like, well, and they just started adding on. And then the requirement was, we need you guys to go to marriage counseling, at least a couple sessions, so we can have a professional tell us that everything we're telling you is the truth, telling them is the truth. And so we really had no problem doing that. We just went and found a treatment provider she was already going to, and where I was signing up at. We set up a meeting. Come to find out, when you're on a domestic violence program, it's against the law, the regulations of how that works, to have any kind of marriage counseling with the alleged victim in the case.
Correct.
And so then we come back to social services and tell them
We
that
can't even do
we
this.
can't
We can't
even
do the
that. We
treatment
can't
plan.
even do that.
This
So,
piece.
but during this time, this is like a 30, 40-day period, and we're just spending money. Like every dollar that's coming in is going right back out as fast as we can make these checks come in. And by the time that they got around to allowing me back into the house, it was too late. The damage had been done. I was so far. We were so far behind. It wasn't sustainable no more. We were literally just, every minute of our day was booked to put ourselves backwards. We were just going backwards.
Did you receive any financial assistance from the
To
department?
move into that house? Yes.
Okay, you
we
did.
did. We did $400.
Yeah.
They helped towards it. It was $1,500 or $1,600 and a $1,600 down payment, and they helped with $400 of it.
Are there any other financial support that you received
No.
from the Department of
I
Human
don't believe
Services?
so.
No.
So you were expected to not live together and have 2 different households and 2 different incomes. But we know how we live in Colorado, that you have to have 2 incomes to make it. And you all had children together at the same time. And that just seems like this impossible road of these multiple roadblocks of not being able to access what you need, which is that support.
And there was a breaking point. So at least the breaking point for me was the place that I had signed up going to my classes. Their policy was, if you don't have the money, you can't come in. And it was like 30.
So you had to pay for your own treatment
for the DV. That's part of also the DV and OB regulations, is that you pay for your own treatment. It's part of
$30 a class.
and it's like 30 or 35.
And
But some places will is it 30 or 35?
It was 30.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, it was like 30, and some places will work. They have different ways of working it out with you.
That's a lot of money.
But the first one that I had was if you don't have the 30, you can't come in. And when literally every penny is getting drowned, I don't have any money and I couldn't do it. So I stopped going to my classes, and that automatically just makes me non-compliant with my probation for that case. And anybody who has been in that kind of situation knows it's if and I see it all the time with the parents that I work with. If you have this one little tiny thing holding you over your head, it's all impossible. Everything is demotivating. I'm not even motivating to go give my social security number to an employer to seek a regular job, because I know at any moment you can just look up where I'm working, show up where I'm working, and arrest me. So there's so many different reasons why I had to go. I just eventually fell right back into the same thing that I did before, and the only way I knew how to survive.
Of course.
And we luckily ended that lease at that house on good terms. It wasn't on bad terms.
Which is a blessing.
That was one thing we were really, really grateful for.
Yeah.
The landlord was really understanding of the situation, and we moved back into a hotel, another hotel where she was working at.
Wow.
And once I couldn't afford my classes, I was really I know that's when it really changed, and we both started getting high again, and I mean, we were really drowning. Even though we were trying, and we were making it to she was making it to the UAs that she could, the classes that we could. I don't know. It became a really heavy weight that we just couldn't carry anymore.
Of course.
And we had all of these things. It would be so much cheaper if we didn't have to do all of these things. Is how it really came down to. Like I wouldn't have to go out here and do everything I can to make all of this kind of money if we didn't have to do all of these things. And at some point, she had a hot UA, and I had no hot UA at this time. I've never had a hot UA in my entire life. But the one thing they did have over my head was my non-compliance with my probation and not going to my DV classes. Yeah. She had one hot UA, and I was non-compliant with my DV classes. This case, my social services case, was never opened for that DV case. When the DV happened at that hotel way back when, the next day a social worker came out to the hotel.
They closed it.
To come out and just do the welfare check because the kid was there. That was closed. Yeah. No, everybody said that was good. Years later, when I'm arrested, now all of a sudden my DV is this whole issue with me and with social services. So that between her hot UA and me missing 1 or 2 classes, they literally, I was walking across the street in the middle of the neighborhood, 2 cops and a bunch of social workers I'm holding one of my kids and I'm walking one with the hand, and they pull up on me in the middle of the street and tell me they have a court order to remove my kids from me again. Wow. And I was like, you're just gonna take my kids from me, like out here in the middle of the street? And he was like, yep. And I was like, well, you're gonna be the bad guy. I was like, you got me messed up if you think I'm gonna go over here. Like, you have to do this. Absolutely. And that was used against me later on because. And they kept, when my son was crying in the car, they kept telling me to go console him. I was like, if you want me to go console him, I'm going to have to go and lie to him. Yeah. And I'm not going to lie to him. You wanted to be the monster, you go be the monster. Yeah. And I told him, isn't this what you're trained to do? I thought this is what you're trained to do. Why don't you go do what you're trained to do and calm my son down? You're the one neglecting him right now. You want me to lie to him? Oof. And when later on in court, that was used against me. Yeah. And so they were and in that same instance when they're taking him, she's literally right across the street, front desk, and she sees this all transpiring across the street from the front desk.
And this is you.
While
see all this happen.
While I'm over here dealing with them, I can hear the cops talking about, well, where's Miss DeBarris, because she has a warrant. She had a warrant that she didn't even know she had at this time, and she sees them taking the kids, so she comes out in full turn up mode, running right at a cop, and I'm like, no, don't do that. Like I thought for sure something bad was gonna happen. And the social worker was like, no, just let her say bye to her kids. So they let her say bye. She was arrested. And really from that point forward, like, I knew, I didn't know what we were going to do. I really didn't have no idea of how we were going to get out of this super big hole. Like, don't have a place to sleep. Now we have, like, and really they took and this time they took both of our kids. Wow. So, and I don't know, I know part of me was like, if they already took him once, this time they're probably not going to give him back. I felt like that, you know, like, and we weren't, and during this time when they were taken, we weren't even the only time in our entire relationship where we didn't stay together or sleep together when we were technically separated was during this time when the kids were taken. I was coming to bring the kids back to her. We were taking turns with the kids. I see. And so it was really just like at that moment, like everything was gone. Like everything that we had worked or thought we had worked for up until this point, we had nothing. Like nothing at all.
Brittany, I want to ask you, how old were the kids when they were taken from you?
2.5 and 6 months old.
How did that feel as a new mom? I mean, with a young babies. How did that feel?
It was heartbreaking, you know, especially second time around because one's 2.5, so he has a little bit more understanding. And having a child tell you, you know,
so sorry.
Having a child tell you, I want to get out of the car, Mom, I want to go with you. It was hard. And the baby just smiling because he doesn't know any better. Of course. He was just happy to see me. So it was heartbreaking, and then knowing that there was nothing I could do because I'm going to jail. I was in cuffs as soon as I said bye. And I was gone for 7 days that time. And during that 7 days, I found out I was pregnant with our youngest now.
Oh.
I was making a joke after I had gotten arrested. Now in Jefferson County, they do mandatory pregnancy tests on every female, no matter if you say you're pregnant or not. Yeah. They do them. And I got called down. I was like, there's no way I'm pregnant. I just had a baby 6 months ago. And they're like, well, everybody, go pee in this cup and come back and sit down. And if we call your name, you know what that means? And I was like, no. And so they came back out and he's all, Miss DeBarris. And I said, fuck you.
Oh.
And he started laughing. But, that was hard because I knew Nate and I were not on the right track together during that time while I was in jail. I had no idea where his head was at, what his thoughts were, because I couldn't get a hold of him. I couldn't remember anybody's phone number during that time being in jail.
I would be screwed if I was in jail.
Yeah.
I don't have nobody to call.
Yeah, I remembered my bosses. My boss that I got arrested from.
That means that you work too much. If that's the only number that you can remember, I'm going to say that you work a little too much, but that's just me.
Yep, and he was able to get the message out that I was trying to get a hold of Nate.
Oh my gosh. Oh my god. So, you guys get out of jail. And
Well,
then
so I didn't get arrested this time.
you didn't get arrested.
Yeah, it was just her. And in that 7 days that she was in jail, I was staying somewhere, and I won't forget the phone call. She, one thing about our relationship the entire time, no matter how much we weren't getting along, anytime one of us is incarcerated or goes to jail, we always answer the phone, and we're going to do whatever it takes to support you. Put money on your books, visit you, whatever it is to make it easier for you. So she was in jail, and even though we weren't talking, she got the number, and she called, and I answered, and she's like, well, you're not going to believe it. And I was like, well, what? And she's like, well, I'm pregnant. And I was like, is that even possible? And she's like, And I was like,
first thing he said is, I'm trapped. You just
so
trapped
now
me.
you just trapped
You
me.
set me up.
And I was like, well, all right. And everyone in the room that I was with, knew us.
Yeah.
So whoa, what was that about? So she gets out, and we still weren't together. That first part, she stayed somewhere else. And during that time is when I really knew, at some point, it was a month or two window where I feel like my PO was really, really patient with me because it took so long for him to issue the warrant or whatever.
Oh, I see.
And from all the non-compliance.
Sure.
So I was really just out there just freestyling.
Yeah.
And then at some point I knew I just have to go to jail.
Yeah.
and I can remember when the night that I got arrested, I went to a friend's house, and I was like, I don't know, I just kind of broke down, and I was like, dude, I'm just going to go to jail. I was like, and he kind of laughed, because that's not something you hear all the time.
Yeah, that's not something
and I was like,
everyone asks.
I just want my kids back, and the only way that's going to happen is if I go to jail.
Wow.
And I left his house. I went to my mom's house, gave her some money. I went and got some food, and I was in an apartment complex in the middle of the night eating McDonald's in the backseat of someone's car, and get lit up by the cops and coming to do just a random little check. Everybody's legit, and I have a warrant, and I don't know, I felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. On my shoulder, I was so relieved. And I remember the second I was in there, the social worker came for our social services case. And because he hadn't been able to get a hold of me. The last two conversations I had with him were not good.
Yeah.
And my only question is if I was too late. And his answer was no. And from that moment forward, I didn't know what I was going to do or how I was going to do it. But I knew something was going to be different this time. And nothing else was worth it. Nobody. My wife and my kids and keeping us together was only as important. I didn't need to talk to nobody. People who owed me money, they can go keep it.
Yeah, whatever.
Nothing matters. Nothing is more important than keeping us together. And before that night when I got arrested, we weren't together, and I had a few cell phones, and I was talking to other girls and stuff during that time. I can remember that first phone call that I had with her when I got arrested. I called her, and she had, of course, already got the phones and stuff. And she was like, if you need money on your books, if you need me to come and visit you, she's like, I don't want to talk about us right now. We don't need to talk about us. And in the process of telling her what my plan was, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know for sure, I got work release and jail time. So I was like, I had a little opportunity there to have a free place to live. So I took real good advantage of getting myself out of that situation.
Mm-hmm.
I told her, she did bring out the phone. She said, at some point we have to talk about the phones.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, I was like, no. I said, it is what it is. I was like, if you want to turn away right now and walk away, I fully respect you and support your decision. I'm never going to be mad at you. And I just hope we can raise our kids together. But if you're willing to give me the opportunity to show you something different, I would appreciate at least just the opportunity. And so she just stayed supporting me, and we really didn't have a plan. We were just winging it day to day. And when I was doing job searches, looking for a job, so for 2 weeks I was at the work release place, just putting in applications. And right after I had gotten out of work release, when I got out of jail, which was jail still, so when I got out, I told her, I was like, look, I don't know how we're gonna do this, and I don't have a real plan in place, but I promise you, every single day from now is gonna be better than the day before, even if it's just by a little bit. And I called my mom and I just asked her. I said, look, I'm not asking for a place to stay. I don't want no money. I don't want no food. Can me and my 7-month pregnant wife please just sleep in the back of your expedition until I can get some money together and get us into a little hotel and start getting myself out of this situation.
And this is all while you have a current active Department of Human Service case. You are homeless, pregnant, lost 2 of your kids to the system, just got out of jail, and
I'm just getting sober.
I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine just that scenario. And your age. You guys were still young at that time. I know you're a few years older, just a few, but you were still young. You're in your early 20s.
Yeah.
Like, you were in your 20s when this is happening. This is not like you're 46, you've been through it before, and this is your, this is 20s.
Mm-hmm. And so we were sleeping in my mom's car, and one day I'm answering every call because it could be a job. What's a job? You know what I mean? So I answer the phone one day, and it's like, hey, is there a so-and-so there? And I used to get calls for this other person all the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, there isn't. I was like, why? And she's like, well, I got a resume here, and I'm looking for work, somebody to work in the Denver area, and I can't get a hold of this person. And I was like, look, this is going to sound real crazy, but like, I'm in a desperate need of a job right now. I don't know, is there anything you could do to help me? And she's like, you're not going to believe this, but if you go on this website, check us out, go make sure it's legit, go to Concentra, take a UA, and if you can do all of this, I promise you 40 hours a week, $14 an hour on Monday. And I was like, well, let me go check, because she needed like a picture of my ID and my social and stuff. So I go and look. It was all legit. Put in the application, and I start as a temp laborer for a really big golf company. And the superintendent of the golf company who was on that project, he really just took me under his wing. I was the only temp worker there. He eventually bought me out from the contract.
Oh my gosh.
And like taught me how to operate equipment, and I played a really pretty big role in building the new Denver City Park golf course right across the street from the zoo.
Wow.
And I was on that project from the time that it started.
How long was that?
Like 2 years.
Wow.
So that started at $14 an hour, which got us into like a little cheap, tiny little hotel. Yeah. And once I had a little bit more money saved up, we put ourselves into the extended stay where it's like a kitchenette and it's more a house. And we were there for like 6.
We were there over 2 months.
2 months? Yeah, we were there for like 2 months.
Until I had the baby.
Oh yeah, and then right after it was literally the day she had the baby. So the day she had the day she was in the hospital with the baby was finally the day that I found an apartment, and I signed the lease, paid everything. So when social services came to the hospital, she's like, well, they needed a like they weren't okay with sending it to a hotel because they let us stay in the hotel before, and that ended bad,
I have issues with that because you being in poverty should not be a reason why your children can possibly be removed.
Absolutely.
You were sober at that time. Mm-hmm. You gave birth to a baby, and now you have to get an apartment, which is even more pressure for you because the hotel is not considered dangerous.
Yeah.
That's not a dangerous place for a child. That means that you are living in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, they came in there ready to take the baby.
100%.
That was their intent, was to take
and
the baby.
Thank God,
disgusting.
or whatever.
Yeah.
The universe was looking out. That was the day that I found the apartment, and I got in there and signed the lease. And
that intake worker was amazing, though.
I told her, I was like, look, I'm not in the hotel. I have a place. You can come and check it out. But literally, I just signed a lease, so there's nothing. Like when she came that first time, the day the baby was born, there was nothing in there.
But it's a home.
But we did have a baby box.
Yeah, but we did have a baby, like one of the ones that's like a bed box with all the stuff. And so we did have that. And
we had his necessities, and that's what matters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and this time, and I don't know. I don't know. There was so many different things that we had that job really like came through at the like best time, because even though I started at 14, it wasn't long after that I was making $25 an hour, and that allowed her to not have to have a job. She just got to stay at home with the kid or with the baby until the kids came home. And we had the money to do stuff. I bought a car. We were able to move around. And that job really just made everything.
But if you didn't, for the parents that don't get that.
Exactly. Like it wasn't because of the support that we got that we were like
the department didn't say, hey, here's a job.
210%. And what everything that we were doing, and we're lucky enough to have the opportunity to have something like that. But the first time we didn't. But my perspective wasn't like that at that time as a job. Like when I got that job at the golf course is the first time that like I was working. Like
you weren't
I wasn't
trying to
just
check boxes.
Yeah, you were
exactly.
actually actively saying, I'm doing something different.
Yeah, I need to bring in,
Yeah.
I need to do this a different way. I don't know how it's going to work, but it is. Yeah. And then so we moved into that apartment, and we were in that apartment for like 2.5 years. And in that time when we lived at that apartment, so the time period when they took the kids the second time, it was shortly right after they took the kids the second time that they filed for termination.
So termination of parental responsibilities, TPR, is considered the death penalty in child protection. What that would mean is that even though that these are the biological birth parents, that someone else would adopt them and they would legally terminate their rights. Essentially meaning that these parents, biological parents, don't exist at all. And that is something that should never be taken lightly, and it happens way too often. Especially in the state of Colorado, there are certain counties that have more TPR rates than not.
Happened to my parents.
Exactly. So this is a huge turning point because in this part, I really want, it kind of goes into the conversation where we had talked about conflict-free children and what that means and what that looks like. So I want you to talk about them filing a motion and saying, hey, by the way, keep doing what you're doing, but we're going to legally take your children away and have another family adopt them. Yeah. But good luck with life.
Keep the baby you have.
Yeah, keep the baby you have. Yeah. You're good enough to keep that baby that you have, but you're not good enough to parent the other children that you birth.
Yeah, and in part to that, everything changed that second time. And I'm not saying that we made poor choices that had negative consequences, but that second time, when one of our kids was taken for the second time and the middle one taken for the first time, which happened together, everything changed. The whole department's perspective and their agenda shifted entirely. Yeah. Where our kids went when they were taken, they were great people. I truly believe they loved my kids, and I believe that they loved them, gave them all the positive energy in the world. But they were made commitments, and I don't know who or when or the specific content of how those things happen, but with those false promises, and when you speak on parents in any kind of way that doesn't accurately represent who they are, people form perceptions, and because of those perceptions, not only does the way they interact with us change, which is basically non-existent. The first time, the foster mom was like super community, super supportive of us, like
I'm taking care of your children. Let me show you respect by being the biological family.
Exactly. But the second one, it was non-existent. And so we
they
never
just cut off communication.
Yeah, like
they don't want to communicate with us.
The visit supervisor would pick them up and bring them to us in the community. So we never even had an opportunity to try to establish a relationship.
And that's so.
But one thing that hurt me the most about doing all of that is not only can I see and feel the way you're treating us by not doing anything, but you're raising my kids in an environment with that same energy in the air. And I don't know how much self-discipline you have or in what ways your agenda and your emotions are rubbing off on my children.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that if you look at me some type of way, how do I know that you're treating my children with that love and respect when you can't give that to me?
Yeah.
And that's essentially what we talk a lot about with the MJ Consulting firm, which is you cannot love this child without loving their parents. You cannot love their parents without loving their community. So unless you're supporting their community and supporting the parents, then that's when you should be able to have that access to that child. But until then, absolutely not.
Maybe you could be a part of the problem.
A lot of the times they are a part of the problem, and they're part of the problem because the system makes them the problem. I don't believe that you should ever be raising someone else's child without having communication with them. I think that it is just greatly disrespectful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just on that human contact, I think it's greatly disrespectful.
So many different things. Culture, lifestyles.
100%. And then it's confusing to the kids because children have loyalty. You have loyalty to the people that are taking care of me day to day, that feed me, that make me happy. And then you have loyalty to your biological parents that you see only a couple of hours a week. I mean, I think in your case, we were able to see the kids twice a week for a couple of hours. But in a lot of cases, that you have, both of you have 1 hour a week.
Yeah.
1 hour a week that you get to see your child that is an infant.
And what's messed up about it, it's not just one one time a week that you get to see your child. It's one time a week that child gets to see their parents as well.
Exactly. It's not always just about the parents. It's about
That's
the child's
that's very,
relationship.
to me, that's so influential.
100%.
You're like, and it happened to me when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I know when you're trying to, when somebody's gaining from something.
They're trying to.
Yeah. Whenever there's somebody,
that.
the only time someone's ever getting hurt is if there's something for somebody else to gain.
Yeah, and see, a lot of the times, whenever things start to feel a little funny and different, that means that they were told, you're going to adopt these kids.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to adopt these kids.
Wow.
And that's the conversation that we have about these foster parents are pre-adoptive parents. You go through the foster care system. A lot of people go through the foster care system to adopt because they cannot afford to adopt through these private agencies.
It's the shortcut.
It's the shortcut. It's the cheapest. And not only
is it the cheapest, but you get paid.
That's what I was going to say.
You actually can make a living.
You can get paid just by being a foster parent,
Mm-hmm.
just by adopting someone else's child, taking care of someone else's child. So all that money that they get, and mind you, some of my colleagues have been like, oh yeah, like we get like $1,800 a month. They know people that get $2,000 a month for one child.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that money that you are giving to a foster parent for taking care of a stranger's child, you can't put that into the family that needs it, that's pregnant, sleeping in the suburban.
Yeah.
No, we have to pay that back later.
Yeah, that's right. You have to pay the government back for being homeless and having your children removed from you. So I really need that to be a point because a lot of people don't understand the way the system works. Not only that,
itemized,
100%.
and every single one of these things, including, and I know for me for sure, I understand that there may be like, we may have like, and it's just like small things, like it's so much so like a big part of a big thing that happened in our case was the hospital, our doctor visits and vaccinations. Like going in, one of the first things that every single time I talked to a professional who was responsible for my kid when my kid was taken from me, I told them I demand certain things, and these things are not to be confused. And I put it in layman's terms. It's specifically about vaccinations. You're never to force my child to do anything. You can speak to my child. You don't have to physically force him to do anything. You're never going to stick a needle in his arm and inject him with anything without my permission. And he needs to go to the exact same doctor that we brought him to because that's the doctor that I trust and I have a relationship with. And that was violated several times throughout the time.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
And eventually it got to a point where everybody had clear understanding that that's not right and that's not what we're doing.
But you have to.
But it was already too late. My needles had already gone in.
Yeah.
Vaccinations have already happened. And those were all kinds of things that were stripped from us.
They
and
take
that
away
was wrong.
your rights without your rights being taken away.
And some people don't have the ability. You shouldn't have to be. Every human being shouldn't have to be a law student to hope that your rights aren't being violated. And I see it all the time. Like even if it is innocent and the parents wouldn't be mad about something, you should at least sit down and explain to them that you have the right to do this.
It's the
and
lack
it's
of
your
respect.
choice.
100%.
And it's your choice. And there were just so many different things like that.
So this is your second removal.
Mm-hmm.
You have your baby. You guys have a home. You're working full time. You're at home with the baby. And then
you're classes, all UAs.
Doing all your classes, all your UAs. All UAs are clean. Visits twice a week.
3 times a week for 2 hours apiece.
Wow.
On top of...
They upped them when we got our apartment.
Okay. Yeah. So you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing. And you're on track and on target.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get the information that, hey, we're going to terminate your rights.
Mm-hmm.
But keep up the good work.
Mm-hmm.
What happens from there?
Well...
How did you feel?
Almost hopeless.
Because you know what that means.
Yeah.
You know what that means due to your history. Mm-hmm. You haven't had involvement as far as with the Department of Human Services as a kid.
I was just questioning why.
Yeah, but you know what that means and what that looks like. So how did that hit you to know that they're trying to terminate your rights?
Well, there's multiple things. I mean, in the very beginning, guilt played a big role into it. And once I was able to get past that is really when I was able to start making different choices. But when I knew that no matter, even though we were doing everything we were doing and we're still going into this, and like it was 3 days for like 8 hours every day. Like the last day was maybe a half day, but for sure it was like 8 hours, 2 days in a row. Just people getting on the stand testifying. And it's like knowing that we're doing everything and that we're even here tells me that maybe this still wasn't even enough. Like even though we felt like those are the kind of conversations we have with our attorneys. Like we're not going to change what we're doing. We're going to keep doing the same thing. But what if this still isn't enough? Like somebody still has the ability to strip me of that, even though we felt like we literally did every last possible thing that we could to not be here, but yet still we're here. So we really had to relive all of that, because that's what it was about. Is the whole time the case was open, a bunch of people getting up there talking about every make sure they're shining a light on every bad thing, and kind of, and the termination report was like 26, 29 page report. And that entire report, the last update about me was from 7 months prior to the day of the termination hearing. Yeah.
Wow. So it was wow.
Misinformation all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Misinformation. And what was the reaction from the foster parents who were then the adoptive parents?
One of the first times I believe we ever saw them
They were there all
was
3
at that
days.
termination hearing. They were there all 3 days. So they heard all of it. And afterwards, I'm pretty sure it was when it was all said and done, they came up to us and they apologized. We're so sorry.
But
we
before we get there, what was said at the end to where you did not have your rights terminated? What happened?
So
it was like the Hail Mary.
There was like, so it was like 11. It was 1:50, and the judge was like, "It's 1:50. I only need 10 minutes. I don't need long, but we're gonna reconvene for the verdict in 10 minutes."
Wow.
So me, her, and both our attorneys are going to the little conference room, and the attorney's like, "Okay, that's kind of a good thing, because this judge doesn't like to keep people in suspense, and she doesn't believe in like being cruel and withholding that information. So the way we've seen her do it is she lets you know right away." And she's like, but we don't know. We've never been in this kind of situation, and we don't know what's gonna happen. And they had never, they didn't tell us this at this point, but our attorneys had never seen it before. So, but you can kind of feel that in the way that they were like answering our questions, and like it was on my birthday, it was on our anniversary, which is, we got married the day after my birthday, and for those 3 days, 2 of those days landed on our birthday and our anniversary.
Wow.
And like I remember our attorneys were like, "We're not going to tell you happy birthday or happy anniversary until this is over with."
Yeah.
And I remember before we went back in, my attorney pulled me to the side and she's like, "If we lose this, I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk to you right afterwards." And I was like, "Why would you say that?" And she's like, "I'm going to feel like this is all my fault." And so that kind of showed me that she was genuinely nervous and scared. She had no real way of knowing. And so when we go in there, we're sitting there and the judge starts talking, and both of my attorneys just starts hitting me on the back, and her attorney like hit her and said, we did it. And like everybody's like all happy. And so then the judge proceeds to say why. And there was 3 big things that she said, "I have a notepad here, and I have a couple things written down that really stood out to me in this whole thing. And this is why I'm denying the department's request to terminate." And the first thing was that at some point in time when the social worker was on the stand, one of the questions he was asked is, if the parents prevail today at this hearing, could you imagine there being a successful case closure and return home? And his answer to that question was yes. And in the Department of Human Services, when you're in court, the number one goal is always supposed to be reunify home.
Yes.
And so she wrote that down and she brought that up. The second thing is that she said, when I first got this report a couple months ago, when I read over this, the last 3 days has been a completely different picture painted than what is in this report. None of this information is accurate or up to date. And also, the third thing was, she said, I seen one of the professionals that she had a lot of respect for, who was like the director of the place where she did her treatment at CTO, and she got up on the stand, and she's like, and one of the things she said is, when I found out that Brittany was in this termination hearing, I was really dumbfounded how she could be in a termination hearing when I know she's doing so well.
Yeah.
And so those were like 3 big things that the judge wrote down, and that made her go against what the department said. But I mean, those moments were definitely really, really intense moments coming back in.
I
It was
can't
like
even imagine.
the longest 30 seconds waiting for her to talk in her entire life.
And you probably didn't even hear what she said.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're just wondering, is my life about to end right now?
Exactly.
Our
And,
attorneys had to tell us.
and we had a couple conversations leading up to that day, and I mean, we were together and we were doing everything together still, but me and her have had several talks during that time. I didn't know if I could come back to this marriage without our kids.
Yeah.
Like, maybe we could find a way to co-parent the kid that we do still have, but I don't think I could wake up and look at you every day
and not have
not have our family. You know what I mean? So that was something that like I was really afraid of.
Of course.
And like I can remember going to one of our last visits, and a visit supervisor, like I really just kind of like go out, like doze up, like days off, and into thought about all the things that could happen, and I don't know what would have happened or what could have happened, but
and you're supposed to keep your composure.
Even afterwards.
You're supposed to keep your composure of the thought that, by the way, you're visiting with your kids. Oh, you may not ever see them again.
Yeah.
But I need you to be professional as a parent and just take it. And then smile with these kids that you may never see again. I mean, I get emotional just thinking about it because I can't even imagine.
And we had that termination hearing was filed long before the date, so it's like that whole time. I know all of you people are fighting for something else. Nobody's here is
no
for
one's
me.
on our
Right?
side.
No one's on my side except for our attorneys. So it's like
waiting for 4 months.
Yeah,
that
for 4 months we had to interact with these people, still go do our UAs. And it really just came down.
You were planning on this the entire time, is what it felt like. You were planning on no matter what. And a lot of times this happens, and I always go back to conflict-free children because children are our most precious jewel. And conflict-free was coined from the term that people didn't want blood diamonds anymore. They didn't want conflict diamonds. So these are the children and the families that are losing their lives getting diamonds for Westerners, getting diamonds for Americans to say, look how beautiful this is. But there's so much blood on those diamonds. There's so much trauma in that diamonds. There's generational trauma in those diamonds. And that's what I mean by conflict-free kids. These foster parents that go into this, they would hear it from one caseworker, the parents are pieces of crap. They don't love their kids. We need you to have them. Please take them.
And you're treated as so.
And you're treated the same way. And then
by everybody,
100%, because they have these biases against you.
And many times it can be somebody all the way up as the judge.
Absolutely, I see that on multiple occasions.
So you can't.
So
it's an impossible situation for so many people.
And in this case, what did the foster parent say to you? Because I'm assuming that one, they loved your kids, and two, they loved them so much that they said that we can raise them better than you, and three, that they were told these are your kids. There's a certain piece, either they're told at the very beginning of the case that these are your kids, or they're told later at the end, we need you to have these kids. And that's when things speed up. Things speed up. If these children were not going to be adopted, this case would have stayed open for even longer. Because usually the Department of Human Services in the Garden Items, they don't like to make children legal orphans.
That might play a big part into why my child welfare case when I was a kid was open for so long.
Because
I didn't want to be adopted.
You didn't want to be adopted.
From the day I was taken, I had the choice and the ability to answer that question.
Because of your age.
Yeah.
But for other kids, they want them like your younger brother, the baby brother. He was adopted out real fast because of his age. So I really want people to think about being a foster parent, and why are you being a foster parent? Are you saying that I want to be a foster parent to either one, get a paycheck, which sometimes is the issue because you've been there,
or
you know
turns into that.
Or
a lot of times it turns into that when you realize what it does.
Exactly. Or two, I want to adopt kids, and all of these kids need homes, and I'm told that these are horrible people, so I'm here out of the kindness of my heart. I do not believe in adopting a child unless I have the parents' blessing. That's the most dignified way. Not the Department of Human Services blessing, not the Garden ad litem's blessing, but if this parent, if you came and said, I love the way you treat our kids, we can't do this right now, can we have a relationship in the future? Thank you. That is the only kosher way. Those are non-conflict children.
Our first foster mom that had our oldest son that was taken, all of the, it's almost going to be 5 children now that she will have adopted. That's how she adopted their kids, with the blessing.
And the entire time she was our son's foster mother, she always supported us.
Oh, see.
And she was, and
that's that community, because I believe you still have a relationship with her. That's what you need. So if you're a foster parent and you're just trying to remove children from a situation, I promise you are part of the problem. You are creating generational trauma. But when you say, I'm opening my home to this child and to their extended loves, that's when you are actively being a part of their community and you're respecting the parents in their community. So I will always feel some type of way.
Agenda-free foster parents.
100%. And we don't know what that is, but parents can tell. Parents can tell. You can tell. they love my child and they can do a better job.
There's a difference between having an agenda and just loving children.
Yeah.
Or I mean, when you're trying to gain, when you're trying to have something to gain, there's somebody that's going to take a loss somewhere from that.
Yes. So let's work on having #conflict-free children in the foster care system, which means that we have to change the entire structure of foster care and the adoption. But I wanted to know, what did the foster parents say to you?
And maybe I can let her answer, but like I know when they approached us, I disengaged at that time. Like
they were the enemy.
I always respected it, and I will forever be grateful for what they did for my kids and the way they provided for my kids and the way they love my kids. I will never knock that down. But I do know at some point you were willing to take my child away from me for the rest of my life without even knowing who I am. And whether you did that consciously or subconsciously, you still did that. And I feel the same way that you just explained, that you did it blindly.
Yeah.
You were trying to do the right thing blindly.
Yeah.
And that's so destructive.
Yeah.
Like, and in that courtroom, when they were present in that courtroom, I was the last person to be on the stand and testify. And the last thing that was said on record during the testimony was, every single person in this courtroom is in a very privileged position to highly impact my kids' lives. And I understand that you guys are here to make that decision. I just hope that decision doesn't get taken lightly. And a big part of that, not only was I talking to the judge and the social worker, but to the foster parents also. And I always kind of felt some type of way that they didn't want to be a part of like the visiting process, or like, you don't even know me and now you're making all kinds of commitments. You may not be saying it to me, but in these FTM meetings, I'm hearing foster parents are willing to adopt, and now that's getting brought up more. You're pushing, like you said, it just speeds things up.
It really does. And as soon as they say,
and it was really like that termination, what hearing was filed, betting on us not making it,
100%.
Not doing what we were supposed to do or supposed to do.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
And it backfired.
Yeah, and in the most beautiful way.
In the most beautiful way.
Brittany, what are your thoughts around the foster parents and what that was like?
After we turned around and realized we won and stuff, first people I looked to was them in the courtroom. I wanted to see their reaction, and that's when I saw they were heartbroken, devastated in that courtroom. And so from that moment, I kind of was like, they were fed a lie. That's how I felt. And we left the courtroom. They came out after she was able to compose herself a little bit, and she just all said is, "We're sorry. We had no idea you were doing so well. Yeah. We were told something different."
Yeah.
And later in private conversation, after the kids were returned home, because I still communicate with them. I send them updates of the boys.
That is so kind of you.
And they've actually recently adopted their own little one. But I reached out and I was like, I want to know what you were told.
Yes.
She's like, caseworker told us that we were going to adopt. She's like, we were ready after that termination to go file the adoption papers that day.
Yeah.
She goes, we were told you guys
were never
engaged. You guys were never going to get it together. You guys were never going to be sober. And that the only things that were going right was visits.
Which was a complete lie.
Oh, that was also on the list of the things on that the judge had written on her piece of paper. That in the whole time, so the first kid was taken, given back, they were both removed. That whole time, in that whole entire time, there was never one visit missed. There was a couple visits where I wasn't present and a couple visits where she wasn't present. But there was never a single visit missed. And the woman who supervised our visits got up there about, she's like, I've seen these people get off the bus, rain, hail, sleet, ice, an hour before we're even supposed to be at the visit. And that was something that the judge wrote down. So that's really, I never really thought about that, but that's really the only information that they had that they could assume that was good, is because they always went to the visit.
Because she had to pick them up from
I wonder, honestly, if the foster parents would want to tell their side of the story. Because I believe that they were victims in this as well. I believe that they were victims in this. I don't believe that anyone was malicious except for the department. And I don't know the Garden ad litem. Was the Garden ad litem in favor for you, or
no?
Shame on them. Shame on them.
She played it safe.
She did. She played it.
She always played it safe.
She didn't do her job. She didn't do her job then. If she played it safe
and
she was not advocating,
only what was required.
she did not do her job. So shame on the Garden ad litem. in your case, and shame on the caseworker in the Department of Human Services, the caseworker and the caseworker supervisor. Shame on all of them, because for you to feel like we never had a chance, and then you were essentially told you don't have a chance, and then you still beat it no matter what, that makes people spiral into their addiction. That's when my parents know that they're filing for termination. I just got an email when we took a break that they're filing for termination, and I know my parent is getting ready to spiral.
Yeah, well, our county attorney and GAL still hold a grudge against the attorneys that we
Yeah,
with,
our attorneys told us, like,
oh,
so and then one of the first things that our attorney said when we come out after we find out we won was, we didn't tell you guys this because we felt like it would do you no good, but in this courtroom we've never seen the judge not side with the department. And so that was something that was really powerful to us.
So they didn't do their job.
If they wouldn't, and the other part of that is afterwards, because the case was still open,
Sure,
the kids weren't given back right then when we won the termination hearing. And
still did like 6 months.
That's still disgusting.
But
that in itself is disgusting. Because you were sober for how long would you say you've been sober?
6 months.
You were sober a solid 6 months, and the children were removed. All of those safety concerns were mitigated. None of those safety concerns were still there. You even got a home for the kids, and you still can't have your biological children back because they'll say this. This is what they say. Well, we don't want to shock the kids. We want to have a transition out. But was there any point that they transitioned those kids from you?
Absolutely
was there any
not.
point that a police officer said, we feel like things are unsafe here. We don't want to fully shock your children that you gave birth to, so let's transition them out of your home into foster care.
No, it's a traumatic experience.
They snatch your children, but then when it's time for them to come home, let's ease them back.
Considerate
It is
of the foster
parents. Let's be
100%.
considerate of the foster
That
parents.
is the most
families.
disgusting thing I've ever, and I hear it all the time. We have to take into consideration the foster parents, but when they remove the children from you, then they say, oh, the children are resilient. Resilient is everyone's favorite word that they use. Resilient.
But and at the end of the day, to me, they're really not.
No.
They're really not. Like, for me specifically, I feel like I was resilient, and I did because I was able to learn from so many different things. But I've seen so many lives destroyed. So many people who I know to this day will never have an understanding of the ways that their mind was abused as a child.
Yes.
So now it affects the way that they think as an adult, and they'll never be able to live a peaceful life with the perspective that they had based on a bunch of choices they had no control over.
Which is why we have the one largest percentage of children that grow up in the system are on drugs, are in the juvenile justice system, and then filtered into prison. So if the system worked, then we will have all these happy little homes and these, mind you, 1 out of 3 adoptions are return adoptions.
Just because something is resilient doesn't mean you have the right to continue to abuse it. Exactly. 1 out of 3 adoptions. 1 out of 3 adoptions are all dissolved because it did not work out. And we have children returned from the foster care system like a Target, Christmas gift. Like, I didn't like it. It didn't work out. I tried it for a couple of years. It's broken.
It's done. It's broken. It's broken because we break them.
Yeah.
The parents don't break the children. We as professionals break them. We don't give them any say.
When I look back and think about the behaviors I demonstrated when I was a juvenile and after my parents' rights were terminated, it's hard for me to understand why I made those choices, but then I also try to think about what influenced those and where I learned how I got to make those choices. And I was controlled. My entire, force.
You had nothing.
By force, just like you said.
You had no say.
When I was taken away, it was by force. And every time after there was by force, I never had no say. And my life was based on someone's personal opinion of what was right and wrong.
Our biases, our professional biases of what we believe is a good home. We gotta change. So, let me ask you this question. Do you think it would have been helpful for you to have a parent advocate, to have someone on your side?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
At what points in your case do you believe that, if you look back, now that you do this work, and you look back and go, dang, that would have been helpful?
Well, for sure, when I couldn't afford the classes no more. Like, when I would say those things to the department, it was an excuse. It was me still not willing to commit to my treatment plan because I have some excuse of why something can't get done. And there was nobody there. You can't speak for yourself when you're viewed as the way they're viewing you. Like, they're not listening to you. It's their way or no way.
Yeah.
And it would have been nice to have somebody that we could, like, this is what they're doing. What can we do? And even just having somebody there knowing that we're going through, we might have been able to take it and get through some of those hard points. There was at least one person who was like, no, I get it, but you don't deviate. Still don't deviate, because that's where we went wrong, and how we allowed everybody else to influence our relationship, our marriage, our family, our livelihoods. And once we realized that this is getting destroyed more than it was when it came in because of all of these outside things, we have to stop allowing these outside things to affect who we are as people and what our goal is and how we're going to achieve that goal. And we knew, and we both knew that as long as we do our part and do everything that we can, go above and beyond, that there's nothing anybody could ever say to us. And even if we would have lost that termination hearing, we would have at least had that. We both know how much we put in and how hard we tried to do everything to make it possible. And so there was nobody to share that with.
These marriages, first of all, because I've been doing this for many, many years, I cannot remember of a case where there was a marriage where the family was together, and after the destruction of the Department of Human Services, they stayed together. But you guys work on these cases, and sometimes you're with the father, and then you work with the mom. Do you think having a marriage parent advocate support, do you think that plays a part in helping keeping the family as a unit?
I do.
I think it helps keep them conscious, definitely.
Yeah, it does. And retelling our story to those parents is really inspiring to them, because they're at a point, usually when we get involved, they're at a point of, do we separate?
Yeah.
Because we're not getting along well together.
Yeah.
We're just going to cause harm to each other if we stay together.
Or if one person's doing right and one person can't do it at the same time, it's really hard to get it done at the same time.
It really is, because my number one thing is separate, because it's going to destroy you anyway. Mm-hmm. The system destroys families. There's nothing that it brings everyone back together, and we're a happy family again. It destroys completely. Yeah. My apologies.
What I say is, it's really, really hard for one human being to be able to continue to evolve and grow. And it's even harder when you throw in tragedy and traumatic events. Yeah. But it's even harder when it's two human beings trying to grow simultaneously. We both did drugs for our own reason. Yeah. We both had our own backgrounds and our different life experiences. Our motivations were different. Our perspectives were different. And somehow we were able to come together and still be able to grow together. And I know for sure when we talk to other parents, the point that I just said really it always resonates with people. The system, the Department of Human Services didn't bring you together, and it should not be the reason that you guys separate. Mm-hmm. And you have to be able to control and understand the things that you can't control, because all of these people are out here influencing you, and there's a million reasons why we could have split up.
So Nate, I'm excited because you've joined the MJ Consulting Firm family. So I will have all access to you and access to you, Brittany, and your beautiful family that I am so graciously just delighted just to know that you're together and thriving and doing so well. And I love the way that you guys just took your first family vacation. And that's so beautiful. I know there's a lot of families and a lot of people that don't have what you have, that have lost the rights to their children, or that's going through this right now. And for you, been through the system and, just came out of it the way that you did and fought. I mean, had a termination, had a TPR that you had to fight through. Are there any words of encouragement or anything that you can give those parents that are going through it right now?
No matter what anybody tells you, or no matter what it is that's going on and what situation you're in, you can make choices to put yourself in any kind of situation you want to be in. And you can make your environment a product of you. No matter what it is, no matter what's going on. It's not easy. It takes a lot. It takes a commitment and a dedication to making it happen. But it's possible. Nothing is impossible. And no matter what the odds are, no matter how many people you have fighting against you, no matter how many people don't believe in you, if you do your part, there's nothing anybody can do to stop you.
Yeah, and this is not your forever. You have the power to change it, and getting in that right mindset is where it all begins. Yeah.
All your pain and trauma didn't happen overnight, so you're not going to get to a perfect place or the place you want to be overnight.
That's true.
But with enough hard work in the right direction, you can really move mountains.
We are so happy to have you be a part of ORPC and the Parent Advocate Program and to support these individuals that are at the lowest place in their life by not having custody of their kids or by having their legal rights threatened for forever.
Exploited.
100%. I am so grateful for you both being here and sharing a piece of you, because every time you share your story, it's like you give someone a piece, just like, just to hold it. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being here with our audience. I'm excited to have you guys back so people can ask you questions of, just getting to know you, because you're just, you're superheroes, but you're human, right?
Yeah.
So I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here and spending time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. And don't forget to tune in next week, Wednesday, 12 p.m. Mountain Time, for a live debrief with our special guest. We look forward to having you join the conversation.